Hello, everyone. My name is David Vogelpohl. I'm with FastSpring. I'll be your host and MC today for our panel, D2C X-Ray Vision, What Top Publishers Do to Scale Web Shop Success. Before I get started, I want to do a little housekeeping. In the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, you'll see a QR code. This is for Slido. I will be monitoring Slido for audience questions along the way. And for this panel, and I think this panel only, if you submit a question on Slido, you will be entered to win a DJI drone. And of course, we have completely filled the auditorium today, and everyone will ask a question. So maybe you'll win, but I think you have a pretty good chance. And I see the person in the back, they're like, am I going to be the person who wins the drone? That would count as an entry, but please ask real questions as well. So thank you for that. And then the last thing on the housekeeping front, there'll be a survey about the session when you're done. Please give that feedback. It's helpful for us as presenters, it's helpful for the organizers, and it's helpful to make Community Clubhouse and GDC better. So thank you for submitting that after the session is done today. Now we're going to push the housekeeping aside, and we're going to talk about the topic at hand, D2C. It's such an interesting opportunity for publishers. At FastSpring, the company I work for, our publishers will often say the profit and revenue expectations they expect to see from the launch of D2C is equivalent to a new hit game. It's that important to their business. But getting reliable information about the strategies that actually work can be challenging. And that's why today I'm honored to be interviewing these industry leaders who have direct experience driving D2C success at scale. Now, unfortunately, they've all promised to abide by their NDAs, but I hope you'll join me today in pulling out our X-ray vision glasses as we talk to our panelists about how their experience in scaling D2C success. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist spent his own money on gaming for the very first time, dumping endless quarters into the X-Men arcade game. The six-person multiplayer blew his mind. He's also known as formerly leading monetization, marketing, and live ops for popular mobile titles at companies like SciPlay and Scopely. He's currently head of gaming at the company I work for, FastSpring. I'd like to introduce Mr. Chip Thurston. Chip, welcome. Excellent. Our next panelist used his snow shoveling money to warm up by the cathode ray tube, playing a game that he bought with his own money. Super Mario Bros. 3 for NES. The raccoon tailspin is still my favorite attack in gaming. He also is head of developer success at Nexus, a creator program in a box platform where he helps publishers like Capcom and another Axiom drive success with their creator programs across platforms, including D2C. Introducing the head of developer success at Nexus, Mr. Travis Neiderhiser. Now, our panelists have similar sounding last names, but slightly different in some ways, so I'm definitely working on nailing it, but I think I got that one, Travis. All right, and then our final panelist spent his own money. He earned mowing a ton of lawns to buy Mega Man for NES. Another Nintendo kid, the Nintendo person in the back, they're like, yeah. But he also formerly served in leadership roles in operations and strategy for publishers like Zynga, MZ, and Kabam. He's currently head of VIP services at Keyword Studios. I'd like to introduce Mr. Jason Dauenhauer. Jason, welcome. All right, so as you can see here, our panelists have a lot of direct experience managing and scaling D2C in different capacities, and I think each of them contribute to D2C success, so I'm really interested to hear the different perspectives that they're going to share here today. But I'd like to learn a little bit more about each of your connections to D2C. So Travis, why don't I start with you? Nexus is a creator program in a box platform. So help me understand your connection there with Nexus and D2C.
Yeah, thank you. So with Nexus, we provide all the tools to be able to build a creator program basically out of a box for you. And really where we see a lot of that success is also building with web shops and being able to leverage creators and influencers to be able to steer towards that web store to provide better value to your players and help drive that revenue. So that's really what we focus on is the creator program aspect of that, but the D2C is extremely important, and it just helps aid pushing that player base into that web store. So that's what we focus on.
And creator programs play a unique role in D2C because they're a marketing they can be a marketing channel outside of the game itself, so those steering rules don't apply basically to your creators.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, anytime that you're doing anything, especially mobile, and you're working with Apple or you're working with Google, they have very specific terms of services that you're not allowed from a game to link to a web store out of that. So creators can steer towards that, and they're not under that TOS. So that's where we find a lot of success with creating the creator program to help leverage the success of a web store.
All right, well, I'm definitely going to ask you more questions in that vein a little later on, but thanks for giving us the context. Chip, you're head of gaming at FastSpring, which is a D2C platform, but you also have a connection to D2C from your past at Scopely and SciPlay. Could you help us understand how D2C played a role in your career to date?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had the privilege of working on direct-to-consumer marketing and monetization strategy as a game developer. So working at studios, like you said, like Scopely and SciPlay, overseeing on the monetization side, what offers are we presenting and how can we actually get players to monetize once they reach our store? But on the marketing side, how are we routing players from our mobile game into our web shop? And how are we understanding these anti-steering policies and then abiding by them so that we can do this not only in a way that's profitable for our game, but also in a way that preserves our relationship with Apple and Google because they remain critical distribution partners for the game. And so overseeing that strategy for several years and then joining FastSpring just this past October, I'm focused on trying to leverage that experience to help not only our customers, but really the industry overall to market and monetize direct to consumer and continue pushing the space forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Chip. Jason, now your connection as head of VIP services. VIPs, I feel, play an outsized role in D2C strategy, I think, at least from my perspective. But help me understand how D2C has played a role in your roles to date.
Yeah, similar to what Travis and Chip mentioned, but different as far as I've been on the gaming side of it, right? And pretty much every gaming company I've been a part of has either already had an existing D2C setup or they wanted to invest more in it. And so while being in CS and operations and studio services for those gaming companies, I was given insight into how to scale it, things not to do, things to do, and then bringing that knowledge over to Keywords so that when we meet with potential clients and publishers, I can talk to them about my experience, which is similar to theirs. So that's kind of where we've melded that together.
Excellent, excellent. Chip, my next question is for you, and I know you're kind of uniquely positioned to maybe answer this amongst this group, maybe not, but do you think that publisher D2C adoption is increasing? Do you think it's waning? Like, where do you think it is from a publisher perspective?
Yeah, I think it's certainly increasing, but I would say it's still in a position where there's a lot of room to increase. So the web adoption and the web store adoption that we've seen in recent years has grown a lot. We've seen publishers not only grow, but improve in the tactics that they're using to get players into those web shops and convert in those web shops. But also a lot of the conversations I have with developers are built around that risk aversion that I would say even puts them at a competitive disadvantage where there's almost this exaggerated fear of pursuing web shops that there would be some repercussion coming down when you look at the other side of the coin and see that there are plenty of publishers doing this today and benefiting significantly from a result. And so I think it's that former cohort that will continue to realize the potential of web shops and continue to drive that adoption in the near future.
So you feel that some publishers still feel fear just even over launching a web shop at all, like it's not allowed, but it's clearly allowed as long as you're following certain rules relative to the distribution channels and mobile marketplaces. Is that your perspective?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's nothing today prohibiting the existence of a web shop. That's plenty of games do that. The rules that are in place and the ambiguity that I think can scare off some developers is around how they market those web shops and how they talk about them inside and outside of their games, and then how they route players from the mobile games to the web shops. And I think because these anti-steering policies can be a bit more of a gray area, where there can be exceptions to every rule, it's not as black and white as some publishers might like it to be, that scares away some who say, okay, I don't understand it completely, and therefore I'm not going to go down that road.
So there's the first step of adoption, which is offering the web shop at all and enabling that with your game. And it sounds like you're kind of also talking about the second phase, where I'm now optimizing how I market to bring people into the store. And you think both are basically areas of growth for publishers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not enough to just say we'll build the web shop and players will go monetize there. Right? We have to find a way to tell our players about it, find a way to get our players into that shop, and not only get them there, but have that habituation to get them there on a regular basis. And those are all the steps to growth in areas we've seen improvement recently, but areas that are a bit murkier and a bit more ambiguous on what you can and cannot do.
I do love those stories, though, where someone launched it as a proof of concept, it didn't market it, and then oops, it's 20% of their revenue. So it is interesting that even launching it sometimes can drive some material success. Jason, what do you see at Keywords? Like, I'm sure you have a very broad perspective on adoption.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I want to dispel fears around web shops, I mean, if you look at Sensor Tower, App Charge, or any of the reporting, places that 80% of the top grossing apps have web stores, right? The clients that we talk to, our partners that we're talking to, either they have existing web stores and they want to optimize them, or they want to build them from scratch with us, whether it's using, our people or our tools and technology. So that's HelpShift, Keywords, those things. So I think there's definitely, to Chip's point, there's still a growing appetite. I think that 60 to 70% of all the games have web stores. That means there's still 30 to 40% that don't. And that's where Keywords and HelpShift can come in and help clients like that.
That makes sense. Travis, I want to now shift to you and think about it from the player's perspective, right? It's more than just adopting a new channel as a business. It's also about getting the customers, the players, to actually adopt it. What are your views on players feeling comfortable making a purchase through a web shop? Do you feel like that's increasing basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, but it really comes down to how you build your web store. I mean, ultimately you have to make it frictionless for that player. You don't want them to have to go to a bunch of steps to try to figure out how to get to your web store, and really making that frictionless experience. And then also really the value of the web store, making it look like your game, right? Some of that same branding that's going to help with that trust. But ultimately, this is where we see, again, creators, influencers really help with that. When an influencer who is playing that game, making a lot of content on that game, when they say, hey, by the way, go to the web store and make these purchases, that's an instant trust that those players are going to have. So we see a lot of success with that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, making it a very frictionless experience for that player. You don't want them to get frustrated. It shouldn't be completely different looking. It should have some of the, if not what's in-game, more value. And that's kind of the important thing to think about with that.
Jason, what about with VIPs in terms of like player adoption? You would imagine that if I'm spending hundreds or even thousands of dollars on a game, that getting 10% more gems or something would be really attractive. Do you feel like VIPs are like an easier path to get adoption, or how do you think that's behaving?
It's a good question. I think it's interesting because, I mean, if you look at some of the more advanced, data models that different VIP programs use around propensity to pay and whatnot, I think, yes, you want your highest value players in your web stores purchasing the good deals. But at the same time, I think there's as much or equal opportunity with those mid-value players, because those VIPs, those high level, the 1 to 2% that make up a significant amount of your revenue, they're going to pay regardless. Of course, they're going to like those deals, and you're going to want to funnel those deals to them and have targeted campaigns and all that. But I think there's a lot more opportunity as well with that next tier down. So I think just being smart about it, understanding the traffic that you're driving, and also how you're actually tracking the purchases and their history post-transaction.
Okay. Chip, Earlier, you talked about how some publishers were still reluctant because of what was allowed. We know we've seen, Epic's lawsuits and the Digital Markets Act in Europe, and we've seen different responses from the mobile marketplaces. So without getting into the geo landscape of what's allowed and not allowed, help me understand from a high level, what is allowed for publishers as they launch and market their web shop or not, and what are the clear things that are not allowed?
Yeah, I think the first, there's really two areas that are regulated by those anti-steering policies, and it's what you can say in your messaging about your web shop, and then where you can take your players from your mobile game to your web shop. For example, we know we cannot link directly from a mobile game into a web shop. You can't have a button in the game that says, go here to go to the web shop, and then you take them directly there, right? That would be a violation of the anti-steering policies. Or a more extreme example would be in a mobile game to have a pop-up display when you hit store that's powered by web, right? The store on a mobile game has to be powered by the mobile platform, so Apple will power your mobile store. So if we can't drive them directly from the mobile game to the shop, we have to go a bit of a roundabout way to get there. And this is where a bit of the ambiguity that I alluded to earlier comes in, but generally the practice that's gaining a lot of traction now is to go from the mobile game to a separate page on the website to then go into the web shop. So for example, let's say I have a new feature or a new event in my game. Maybe in the game I have a few bullets at a very high level to tell players about this new feature. And I say, hey, for more information, click here. They click on that button, and then it takes them to the news page of my website. Right? Well, I'm not taking them anywhere they can monetize, so that's fine. Generally, that's fine within the anti-steering policies. And then, once they get to this news page, there's a big flashing store button that says, special offers, come here. We're trying to get them into the store once they get there. But I also want to be clear, that's not a hard and fast rule that this is perfectly okay. For example, if I take them to that news page, and the news page consists of 2 bullets of text and then a giant store button, technically, am I abiding by the same rules? Yes, but it's pretty disingenuous, right? I'm basically steering them into the store. So you have to find that balance of being tactful and respectful of these anti-steering policies to be directing players into this page that's more of a destination for them, a complementary experience to the mobile game, and not just taking them from the mobile game into the store.
A lot of people, when they talk about D2C, talk about delivering a valuable player experience in both the shopping experience, but then the web portal and the website. What do you think the role of player experience plays as people think about this strategy? I mean, you talked about it I'm going to bring people to the site and eventually they'll be the shop. I think these are kind of the commercial concerns and staying within the rules, but how do you think of the balance of that? What is the point of all this from the player's perspective and their experience?
Yeah, I think the revenue is your end goal as the developer. Obviously, you want to drive this revenue through your web shop, but it's more of a function of the other value that you're giving to the player through that website, because you are making it that complementary experience where there's an inherent value in that. For example, with news, if I'm a player that wants the full detail, I want these paragraphs of content about this new feature that released and how it really works and how I can understand it, then that website becomes a valuable resource for me as a player to understand that. Maybe I have a new community tips and tricks page or a guide so that when a new character releases in the game, I can understand their full mechanics and how I can really take advantage of that. And that's much more content than I could really understand inside the context of the mobile game. So it's well suited for this website. And then to your point, what you're doing by giving players these pages of news, tips and tricks, or even player support, you're giving them reasons to come back and value this website, and then it kind of becomes secondhand. So when they make a purchase, they're like, oh yeah, I'm here on the site anyway. I might as well make the purchase here instead of the mobile shop.
I often think about this idea of the balance between suffering and joy with designing systems like this. And what I didn't hear you say was that content that was well suited for the game should be ripped out of the game and put on the website just for this gating purpose, but rather that it was appropriate for the medium, and that you felt that was maybe key to thinking about the types of content and experiences you deliver on the web?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything on web shouldn't be a detriment to mobile, right? As game developers, we don't want to do anything detrimental to our mobile game. That's still priority one. We still need to make a great game. And it's not about putting things on web just for sake of putting them on web. It's about leveraging what web can do and what it can be relative to mobile, what's well suited for web, And yeah, it synergizes perfectly with also trying to drive that revenue through your web shop.
Excellent. I think you've given some good perspectives, especially as publishers think about doing this for the first time. Travis, I know y'all have a bit of a playbook, or you think about like the resources and strategies that people should really nail when they first get going with D2C. I'm curious if you could share a little bit about your perspective on that.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to what we've been saying a little earlier. I mean, I think number one, getting something out there is important, iterating on that, and also kind of alluding to what was being said earlier, getting creative with blogs, for example, leaderboards, different things like that will help. But to your question, and working, being able to be that resource, so like working with somebody like FastSpring or Keywords or Nexus, we can help provide additional resources for your team instead of trying to build something from scratch, right? Leverage people who are in the industry, who work with a bunch of publishers to help with these things. So really working with somebody like us three up here, we have those tools in place for you to be successful because we've seen those before. So I think that's kind of where we land with that.
Excellent. I've got a question from the audience, and I'm going to go open. I don't know which of you is going to like jump on this one, but it's kind of interesting. For games, I'm going to assume they're talking about mobile and companies who don't want to play in the Apple Android store ecosystems and follow these policies. What are their best alternatives? So if I want, I guess, presumably to make a mobile game, but I don't want to have to abide by the rules, what are my options? I mean, maybe like side loading on Android, web games. I see a lot of, yeah?
I mean, I'll let you start if you want. There's not a lot, I don't think there's a lot of options.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. I really appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I think Apple and Google are critical distribution partners. And so I understand not wanting to engage with them, but I would first really interrogate the decision to not engage with them and say that, yes, 30% of revenue is a lot of revenue to be paying out for the privilege of using their platforms as distribution channels, but there is a lot of value that you're getting in return as well. And so I wouldn't lose sight of that, and I would really want to make sure that was a thoughtful decision. But I do think other platforms can be helpful as well. There would be, you could consider side loading, could consider the Epic Game Store on mobile as well. That's one we know it's still pretty nascent, but I think has a lot of potential. And the other one is more and more companies are looking into web ports for mobile games where they can be a partner and do a very seamless transition of a mobile game to be playable on a website as well. Without any app loading or download or anything like that. And so I do think there's a few distribution channels that could be considered as alternatives.
So it sounded like you weren't recommending that someone pursue that as an exclusive strategy, but maybe as a complementary strategy as part of a multi-channel distribution
Yeah, exactly.
plan.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about today, right? It's being able to create those steering rules. I mean, at the end of the day, you want your player to have a good experience, and like I was talking about earlier, frictionless. They're going to get a really frictionless experience when they're buying through Apple, buying through Google Play. So I think I completely agree with you. It's not something that you should really, I think, focus that as a strategy. Your strategy should be more around how do we get that revenue back by pushing them towards a web store.
Great insight. This is another audience question. I have to ask this one. Very good. From Noi. Thank you for this question. I hope I said that right. How can you connect gameplay with the web shop or web portal? You talked about leaderboards, you talked about news, but like, what about gameplay? How could one connect gameplay with their web experience?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think a lot of different gaming companies have done a lot of different strategies around this. I think some have done it well, whether it's like a streak, right? Setting up streak bonuses, login bonuses, or even announcing a new hero within the game, right? A new weaponry or what have you in the game. I think done smartly, to Travis's point earlier, that experience should feel just like you're in the game, but it's not in the game, right? So as well as having people be able to come back. So I think there's a bunch of different ways to do that, but those are some of the similar ones that I've seen in the past.
And what I'll add to that as well is what we see with success with some of our successful creator programs and steering rules towards a web store, giving some type of exclusive thing, maybe in game. Maybe it's a title if they make this purchase through the web store, give them some type of exclusive. I know English, it's my only language and I barely know it, so you guys know what I'm trying to say there. But I think that's important, making them feel special and driving a specific reason, and that can introduce into the play or into the game, right? Maybe they get a little hat or, an avatar or something special to that too. So we've seen a lot of success with that.
Yeah, and I have one more example as well, which is players love voting, as it turns out. It's just the thing that players love to do. So having a poll on a website, but not just having a poll for the sake of having a poll, but having a poll that tethers back to your game somehow can be extremely impactful. So for example, let's say I have guilds in my game and there's a guild competition on weekends or anything like that. So you run a poll each time that event runs and you say which guild is going to win, and you put up the poll. Maybe you give players a little freebie just for voting. So you're incentivizing that behavior to just go visit this page on a regular basis. That's great. That's creating this habituation that you want with your website, where players are getting more comfortable going back there and you're establishing that trust. And then let's say you go a step further and say if you pick the winning side, you get a second freebie. So you're like, okay, great. Now I'm incentivized to know which guild has a better advantage here and which one I really hope wins. So I'm going to vote for that one. And then that creates this extremely effective flywheel where you're creating this habituation. Players are going back there, they're going to vote, they're engaged with the outcome, and the outcome is tied back to the game that they're playing. And so it's all of this behavior that exists through your website, but it's getting players there and coming back. And so I've seen that be really effective as well.
I love that example of getting those players to participate and create that cycle of feedback again. Jason, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I
on
just
this?
wanted to say, even outside of gaming, like I like to play golf, okay? And there's this simple app within my home course, and you log in, and every day you can go spin this wheel to win yards. And with those yards, you can book tee times outside of the app, right? So it's happening everywhere, and I think simple is best, right? But obviously, as long as it feels like I'm using this product the same way, like, and getting the better benefit, players feel the same way too. So it's not just in gaming as well.
Travis, when it comes to creators and choosing like incentive percentages, this is basically coming from an audience question, Varan. I hope I said that correctly. How do you think about incentives for creators? Are you giving them like higher commissions on web referrals because the profits are higher? Like, how should publishers think about that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so absolutely with web stores, right? And so because you're not splitting that revenue now with this other platform like Apple or Google, you now have a lot more revenue to play with, and you can incentivize creators pretty easily with that revenue. Or even something, hey, if they go to the web store, the player gets an extra 5% when, in-game currency or something when they make this purchase. But when they use a creator code with that, now we can say this is from the web store. Now maybe any creator that drives that sale, we can now offer them 20% if it was a web platform versus maybe the in-game code, which was 7% or something like that. And that's where, I got to do a little bit of a sales pitch, but that's where our creator program tools work really well, is you can adjust those percentages based off different tiers. And we really encourage that. Your higher influencers, the ones that are really just creating so much content, they've been by your side the whole time, giving them a little bit more of a revenue share. We see success with that, where maybe the newer ones, they're just getting started. We don't really know how successful they might be within this program. They can be in a lower tier and work their way up. So those are really great. And then also we see a lot of success where the creator, maybe it's a game with guilds or things like that they have a following in, getting them to do some type of events in game, and if their guild matches this, they make so many kills or whatever it might be in game, now we give them that special title, like we talked about, giving them those exclusive things to really get them to participate in these different programs and events. But really, to answer that question, yes, it makes it a lot easier to play more with the revenue you have because you have more to play with at the end of the day.
I remember my first job in digital in the mid-90s, and my boss said that all of digital is a battle between eyeballs and content. And it sounds like what you're saying is because those creators control the eyeballs that is driving that value for your business, you can reward them more for the share that you might have rewarded a marketplace for their eyeballs for bringing you maybe that player to begin with.
Perfectly said.
Excellent, excellent. Jason, so help me understand from the studio perspective, and I know you're going to answer maybe from keywords perspective, but what do you do to help publishers with D2C success? What do you see on the studio side?
I think when you're dealing with VIP and high-profile players that spend a lot of money, even internally when I was working at Zynga or Machines Under Command, whether I was in studio operations or customer service, individual studios value those players so much. It's even hard to like, hey, can I see your base? Can I treat your base? So imagine the challenges around doing that as a vendor partner, right? I think, myself and some others on the team at Keywords, we have that background, and so we have a way that I think we help publishers understand. Like, we understand it's hard to give us your base and let us put some treatment on it, or hey, let's look at support and VIP in a different lens. Like, have you looked at X, Y, or Z? Because typically, like, if the money's coming in and things aren't broken, why change it, right? But now with the changing landscape of D2C and all the legal stuff that's going on with Apple and Android, I think the opportunity's there. I personally came to Keywords also. They acquired HelpShift. HelpShift's one of the top CRMs in the gaming industry. They have the tools and technology and history that, those clients and those publishers trust them. So I think those things combined, it's really provided a strong kind of concrete foundation to get studios to think about doing things differently, and that's what we're seeing. We definitely have clients that haven't tried new things, that want to try new things, and are, since I've been on board as well. So, yeah.
So guiding them through that complexity and that journey.
Yeah, and I think like Travis and Chip mentioned earlier, sometimes the fear around it, dissipating that fear with just, whether it's a case study, whether it's me or somebody else on the Keywords HelpShift side, showing them the data that, there's opportunity here.
I'm going to go with another audience question in 1 second, but before I do it, I want to get a show of hands poll, because this is very on my mind. Raise your hand if you prefer the term web shop. No one? Okay. Web store. There we go. Lots of hands. Something else. Okay. No one else. All right. This has come from an anonymous person. It's a great question, whoever you are. What is a web shop?
It can be whatever you want it to be, David. It depends. For me, when I think of a web shop or a web store, I use those interchangeably, so I apologize if there's any confusion on that. A web store is the page upon which players can monetize on a website. That's how I think of it. And so when I think of a web portal, I think of that as the full suite of pages on that website. So maybe you have a home page, a leaderboards page, a tips and tricks page, and oh yeah, there's also a web store. Those are all different pages on a website. But the distinction there is very important because of the anti-steering policies, which say you cannot link players to a page where they can monetize. That is, you can't link them to a web store, but you can, again, generally link them to a page where they don't monetize. And so the other part to consider is where you have offers might pop up on the page, or maybe be on the sidebar of the page. Those could be potential pitfalls for how you're routing players from mobile to web. For example, taking that earlier example of routing them into a news page. Maybe on that news page, I've launched a new bundle on my website. I'm very excited about it. So I have a modal pop up that says, hey, you can have this new bundle, $19.99. Click here to purchase. Well, now you're taking them into a page where they can monetize, which is in violation of those anti-steering policies. And so it really behooves you as a developer to contain all of your monetization on your website on that web store so that you're giving yourself more inroads from a marketing standpoint.
Safe and steady with Chip Thurston. Any other points of view on this one? Jason, anything to add on what a web shop is for you, or web store?
I mean, Chip explained it well, and I think someone was violating something right there, that noise. So I don't know if that was Apple or Android, but no, I think that's simply put.
Here's another great question. I should just retire writing questions and just read them from the audience the whole time. But we have Forrest who asks, is there a sales volume threshold at which an indie studio should consider setting up a web shop? Like, do I do it in the beginning? Do I wait till I reach a critical mass? When should I do it?
I would say don't wait. Start now. And then again, I think one of the themes here is you do it alongside, Apple and iOS, and slowly take revenue off into your own. There's no time to wait. Like, you're just going to be behind your competitors at this point.
Yeah, and I just think that the data shows there's significant value in having a web store. It doesn't have to be perfect, so completely agree. You shouldn't be waiting. You should just get along with the game.
And I would actually flip that question on its head and say, what is the downside of waiting? And I think there's actually, you're creating a bit of a headache for yourself in the future if you wait to really consider a web portal. For example, let's say I have an item that I want to have a shared inventory between mobile and web. Maybe there's this event ticket system in my game where there's an event coming this weekend and I can purchase the ticket one time. And I can purchase on mobile or web, and obviously as the developer I want players purchasing on web. But as soon as the player purchases on either platform, it needs to become unavailable on the other platform, right? These systems need to talk to one another. Well, if you delay any consideration of creating this web shop to be done in the future, that's something you're going to have to rework your infrastructure in the future to accommodate having multiple platforms. And so I think just having it in mind from day one is the really critical part, whether or not that store launches on day one or at some point once you get a little bit more footing underground. As long as you've considered it and your infrastructure can accommodate multiple platforms, then you'll be setting yourself up for a smoother future.
One more thing too, because we're talking about monetization, web store. For the indie question, the big, huge thing, equally valuable, is controlling the relationships of your players, right? From the onset. So owning those and really being a part of it, because outside of it, it's Apple and Android from the payment process. So coming from a CS guy, that's one of my things, but. I think there's a real ROI on getting into those relationships with your players early on, and not waiting on that.
Would you say it's fair that in order to build an enduring business, you need to build those direct relationships sooner than later?
Correct.
Okay. Travis, my next question is for you. So one reason why people or publishers might delay launching a web shop is they don't have web developers in their engineering department. So let's assume that I launch one and now I have a web developer. Maybe I didn't go with an agency or some sort of like out-of-the-box solution. I actually have a custom web shop, custom player experience. Where does that person report to? Where do you recommend folks consider having that person report into?
If anybody has that answer, you can let me know. No, it really will fall between. I mean, when you think about a game publisher, engineers, you're usually talking about back-end services, user experience, game engine engineers, things like that. Generally, find marketing generally will own the way the web store works and functions. A little bit with product, but I feel like if you're really focusing on that player experience, user experience on the web, that web developer is probably going to be best to be under the marketing team. Obviously, that changes drastically with the publisher size and things like that. But if they can work directly with marketing and kind of be their little engineer and help ensure that what they're trying to do on paper can really come to fruition in that web store, I think that that's a good marriage. But ultimately, really finding the right engineer, because it's a completely different animal. You're not doing C++. You're doing a lot of web development, web engineering. That's a different role. So I think really just focusing on somebody who has the right background. Where they report to, it can obviously depend, but it generally aligns with marketing, what I've seen. But obviously.
Chip, you were a director of product in your last role. What's your point of view on where this type of role should report into?
I think it really depends on the goal of what you're wanting to achieve and how much that initial development is focused on just creating the foundation of your website, or if it's really focused on driving the awareness of the website, because that could be a marketing function or a product function. And I say that because there are also ways you can outsource that development. Right? There are plenty of partners out there, including the FastSpring plus Nexus solution, which you should learn more about at fastspring.gg. But with a solution like that, you're outsourcing the development of your web shop. right? And we'll handle all of that for you. So you don't need necessarily the product expertise to do that, but you do still need the marketing know-how to be able to drive players there. And so in that case, I would make it more of a marketing function. But if I were going to say, I'm going to build this in-house, I want to have all of that design and consideration of what the different pages on my website will be, then okay, now we're talking more of a product function and having that strategic oversight for it. So I think it really depends on which direction you want to go.
And then the last point I'll make, and you kind of alluded to it, Chip, is ensuring that that web store is reading from the same data structure that your in-game is reading from. So sometimes that can bleed into the engineering side, right? But I think it doesn't matter really where that engineer or developer is. I think it's making sure and ensuring that your teams are not siloed. The engineering team that's building the back end, they should absolutely be talking what is the expectations of that web store and that front end. So really keeping that communication, having some type of ambassador I've seen very successful, where everybody's on the same page. Because the worst thing you want to do is have this web engineer build out this web store and it doesn't work at all with the back-end services that were built, and now you're having an issue with the in-game shop is different than the web store shop. You start to lose that player trust now because why is it so different? Things like that. So a little point there.
Are you saying the back-end op should be the source of truth as you express your, I don't know, e-commerce experiences via web shop or otherwise?
Well, as a back-end engineer, I generally would say yes. I mean, but really, whiteboarding out and working with the multiple teams is really the best way to do it, right? Like, get into a room, get your engineers in there from the different teams, and just really get a good plan in place. I mean, and then obviously it's like, oh, how do we fit in this roadmap? That's always the question. But unless you don't know how much work it's going to take, you're never going to know when you're going to be able to squeeze that into your roadmap. And getting the multiple teams in one room is going to be the best way to ensure that you can do that.
I remember from my agency days working with clients and presenting tools that were like an out-of-the-box solution versus thinking about a custom experience route. And it was always like this dream and wish list they would have that would pull them out of this out-of-the-box approach. But out-of-the-box approaches enable you to go fast, and they can deliver a lot of value quickly. Chip, what is your view on when folks should consider one versus the other? Like, are these tensions as I'm describing them, how you think about it? Do you think about it a little bit differently? How do you feel about that balance?
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate in terms of the path of least resistance to get this up and running. An out-of-the-box solution can be very effective in that respect. Just to have something that you don't have to invest that much in so you can understand what potential is out there. But the caution I would give with that is also that, one, you're constrained to the tools you have available. So whenever you have an in-a-box solution, there's a toolbox you can use to build the website as you want using those tools. But then eventually at a point you might want to go beyond that. You might want to do different things, add in different things, and you realize that you're pretty limited in what you can actually do there. And the second negative outcome of that is, as you've grown, at some point you might say, okay, I think I'm ready. I want to take this in-house because I'm seeing enough profit here that I can easily justify the investment that it would take to do this in-house. But I'm using this tool set that doesn't make it easy for me to do this in-house. So now I have to start from scratch in some cases. I have to build an entirely new experience. And it's not only the investment to build that experience, it's the experience of your players going from one web experience to now a new web experience that you're building from scratch. And there is some friction you're introducing to that process. And so the ideal for me is not to find a solution where maybe there's an in-a-box solution or a partner you can use that also makes it easy to take it in-house at any time in the future that you want, not one that's going to have you married to its tool set such that you have to really start over at some point in the future if you do want to change course.
Facing this painful graduation moment, basically, in the future. Jason, I know you've thought a lot about the future of D2C, and you're planning to publish a white paper soon. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that and what you view as the value there.
Thanks, David. I've been working on this white paper for a while. There's a lot of information out there on D2C, and as I've been working with different publishers and working with keywords and Helpshift, opinions have changed and have kind of morphed into this other thing. I think we were talking about it, Travis and David, earlier about cart abandonment and how in gaming, like in e-commerce, it's a well-known thing and there's strategies around that. It's been my experience with some of the clients that they've set up these web stores but then there's no strategy around cart abandonment and stuff like that. So it'll be a more focus on that. There'll be a high-level D2C, just overview, do's and don'ts. But it'll be focusing on cart abandonment and kind of the changing landscape that's going on within gaming.
Yeah, it really feels like the sophistication in web shops and web-based commerce is very behind in a way to the rest of e-com and other industries in gaming, and it feels like that's a big opportunity. I mean, I always love it when something's wrong because we can fix that thing and make more money and grow, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think proactive outreach and support in gaming can always be better. I think HelpShift has some great tools with the web chat, and we're building some great things for some clients, but I think there's opportunity, and I think there's ways to do it better, and that's what we're doing.
All right, I'm going to switch to an audience question again. We're going to go from Suman. Suman asks, what's the optimal D2C revenue share to target? What percentage of your revenue should you expect to be D2C?
I would say it depends. It depends heavily on the genre that you're focusing on and the behavior of your players. There's a few reasons for that. If you're in, let's say, a mid-core game, when I worked on a mid-core game, we had all these great channels that our players would use to communicate both about the game but also about the web shop. For example, a Discord server or a subreddit or even a Twitch channel. And those were players where we'd have this really healthy organic word of mouth, such that if there was more value on the web shop, as there was, players would tell one another about it, tell their guild mates about it, and it was a great growth vector for our web shop. And we were able to get a lot of traction and a lot of growth through all these different channels. And also, as you said earlier, those are not as beholden to the anti-steering policies that are in place because you're talking about it on Discord or Twitch. So you can be a bit more open about how you're discussing your web shop and marketing it there. By contrast, I've worked on a casual title where we didn't have any of those things. We didn't have a Discord server that players use. We didn't have a subreddit or a Twitch channel or any of these things. Players didn't talk about the game outside of the game, basically. So that meant any communication had to be done through the game. And that limited the upside of what we could achieve through the web portal. And so there's not, I wouldn't feel comfortable putting a hard percentage on it. But I would say the ceiling is higher in a case of that example where I have a mid-core game versus lower in the case of a casual game, just based on the growth vectors that are available. But the last thing I would say on it is where we are today, the ceiling that is in place as of March 18th, 2025, is only going to go up as more regulations happen, as tactics continue to evolve, as web shops continue to get normalized with players. We'll see more and more adoption of web portals, both from players and from developers, and that will continue to shift more revenue from mobile over to web.
I'm going to press you a little harder on this question, Chip. I'm going to use your own technique of like extreme examples. So what would be the percentage if someone said, I have X% of D2C, that you would say, that's pretty good?
I mean, it depends. I just went through this. No, I think...
Like, is 20% achievable? Is that a good goal? Should people be shooting for 50% or higher if they feel like their game is more engaging with their players? Like, if they're not too casual, basically?
Yeah, I do think, and in the case of a mid-core title where you have all these different tools available to get players over to your shop, yeah, I think driving the majority of your revenue through your shop is feasible. And something you should aspire to. Whereas on a casual game, maybe 20% is a great number to be able to achieve, and say there's still, maybe it's only 10%, maybe even 5% to start, and then as you hone your tactics, you can grow from there. But even if it's only 5%, that's still a very healthy amount of profit that you're adding to your game because the effective rate of that revenue is so much lower.
Jason, one of the pillars to e-commerce conversion rate optimization is instilling trust. How do you think about instilling trust with players when they shop on web shops or just generally experience D2C?
Yeah, good question. I think, like any of us, I think we've been around long enough that when we land on a web store, we understand right away for most cases, if it's legit, right? If someone's really trying to steal from me. And I think back to Travis's point around creating and branding it to feel like as much about the product as it is, even more so. So I think number one, also having a payment provider that people trust as well. That's huge, right? People aren't just going to go put their credit card in and they don't know who the payment provider is. Not to mention the whole merchant of record, which is a big piece too. But I think making things feel familiar, like it's part of the game, like this definitely feels legit. That's working with communities to build that. And then, making sure that, when you're delivering what the player wants. That's a huge step too. But I think the look, feel, and the way that you set up from the beginning, and the added content, as far as like getting them to come back to, those are kind of the keys there.
Travis, I think this question might be good for you. This one's from Ray. Any examples of direct-to-consumer driving re-engagement or adoption of the game? We often talk about like the players that love the game, we're going to maybe convert them over to D2C, but what about re-engagement or adoption?
Yeah, well, we actually find this is where creator programs work really, really well. Our data shows that creator programs help with player retention, so keeping players engaged. We see creators convert players from free to play to now they're paying. We also see creators creating other creators, right? Like, so if a creator is already creating content for you, now you're giving them a bit of a rev share. I mean, why wouldn't they continue to make more content for you? Why wouldn't they then spend a little bit more time editing the video, polishing it up, and really making it a better, really presentation? Yeah, I think that. What was the question though again? I don't think I even answered the whole question.
Any examples of D2C driving re-engagement or adoption? And I think you had a good answer, which is that because the creators are basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so we do see that, and especially when you go to the web shop, being able to, I think I mentioned this earlier, but being able to provide a little bit more value, they're getting a little bit more percentage. That then creates a player that's going to want to continue to drive towards that. And we see creators are really helpful for getting your VIPs and your big players to spend even more money because they're the ones that are the most engaged. And they're the ones that are following these creators, and they're the ones that are going to want to go get that better value and continue to support that creator, which creates this really great cycle of driving more revenue towards that.
Awesome. What about you, Jason? What do you see at Keywords on this front?
Yeah, similar to that, I think an example would be like, hey, Travis was a VIP in my game, and he stopped spending, right? And Travis comes to the store because he saw some flash that caught his eye, and we pop a web chat and say, hey, Travis, we noticed you stopped buying this package. We also noticed that you submitted a support ticket about this bug. The bug's fixed and the package is cheaper. That's a simple tactic that we can do today, right? And I don't know. I mean, if I'm a high spender and I'm trying to, if I'm a high spender and I'm back more interested in the game, the fact that I'm on the web page and I'm interacting with a human, there's a higher chance that I'm going to reactivate.
So you're delivering a personalized experience based on their interactions and the fact they're more likely to spend. So I know you're like all about the VIPs at Keywords, but I'm going to switch this VIP question to Chip because I know you've experienced this as well. For many games, VIPs are like 70% or more of revenue. Should publishers only focus on VIPs when they think of their D2C strategy? Is that a good way to get started and like try it out, or how do you think about that?
Yeah. I think of it as phases of growth when it comes to driving direct-to-consumer revenue, and VIPs being your primary revenue drivers do make sense as your place to start, right? You don't need to shift all of your players from the mobile game over to the web shop. If you can only get the VIPs at the beginning, that can result in getting the majority of the revenue, depending on your game and how much of their purchases you shift over to web. But I think as Jason articulated earlier, there's a tier below that, and that can be where you focus on expansion and say, okay, maybe some of those medium spenders have a lot of value too. And so it more depends on where you focus your efforts, and say you do start with your VIPs and you say, okay, let's get that in a good spot and really focus on the white glove experience that they want, and also making sure they're aware of this web shop and the value that it can have. And then once you see some success there and you see things start to level off, you're like, all right, well, now we know there's an opportunity on the next tier of spenders. And then maybe you even go below that. You say, let's go for the low spenders after that. Because at the end of the day, it benefits any player, regardless of how much they spend, to be purchasing on web instead of on mobile. It just benefits the one who spend more But over time, it could benefit everybody.
One of my favorite quotes is, "We don't have time for good ideas. We only have time for great ideas." And business leaders within publishers will often advocate to maybe adopt D2C as a channel strategy. Chip, I know you see this in your role and have experienced from the past building cases like this, but what should people consider when making the case for D2C internally?
I think the main point that often gets missed is the future potential. I'll see sometimes business cases get bogged down in mapping out how much revenue could be driven in the next month from direct to consumer and saying, if we drive this much revenue, it's this much profit. Maybe it's like 1% of revenue or something pessimistic about not being able to get a lot of traction initially. And what that misses is all of the reasons that that revenue should grow, both in terms of their players getting comfortable with it, their web portal evolving with further development, and of course, if regulations do materialize, as they're likely to at some point in the next year or two, that continuing to accelerate that growth curve. And so I think it should make sure it maintains a long-term perspective on this business case, that it becomes this foundational profit channel for your game that will benefit you for years to come, because that's what we should all be thinking about as game developers, is this expectation that our games will be around for many years. And so how can we put ourselves in that position, not just for 2025, but also 2026 and 2027, and how can we make our games as profitable as they can be?
Excellent, great insights. Jason, this question is from you, well, not for you specifically, but I'm going to ask it of you. It's from Joe. Joe asks, when you mention creating a frictionless experience, what are examples of friction that you have observed in web stores? Maybe like requiring player accounts to log in and use them?
Logins, authorization. I mean, I play a game. I play lots of games. If you play any game that's connected to Facebook as well, you're going through multiple authorizations as well. I think anytime, I think at companies I worked at with the gaming side, there was huge efforts to have unified player IDs to mitigate those friction points. So anytime you're playing a game, it's just my opinion, like you should have one unified ID across all the games if you're playing with a specific company or publisher, right? But there's been tons of cases where I'm playing games, I have to jump through hoops just to log in here or there. Same thing, I think it's by design, but from a customer service standpoint, the number of clicks it takes to get through to support either a support ticket or a live agent, which is also, a friction point too. So, yeah.
So reducing the number of steps and number of clicks that players have to take. Do you like putting things like player auth and other more complex tasks after the checkout process? I know pushing things after people enter their payment information is a strategy people use to reduce friction pre-purchase.
Yeah, I think it depends on the game and the product, the way it's set up. But that should all be thought about as you're building your web stores, right? SSO and all that stuff. That's to Travis's point earlier, not having things siloed and having, all the gaming companies that I worked with before I came to Keywords, whether it was central tech or a central entity that was kind of spinning things up, but also pulling people into the right direction, because the payments and the auth are a huge part of that. And if you can address those early on before everything gets built, you can limit those friction points.
Awesome. Well, on that point, we're out of time, so we'll go ahead and wind it up. Our speakers will be here to the side, but we'll also be outside if anyone has any deep dive questions. I know they'll kind of usher us out of here after the event, but please join me in thanking our panelists.